Solar Genesis. Depthborn. Chapter 2. Academy Currents. By D. Wayne Harbison. The scent of recycled salt water and clean polymer filled the air as Caspian stepped through the glass-paneled entry of the academy. The school loomed before him in sleek arcs and tall towers of gleaming white and pale blue, its surfaces reflecting the artificial sunlight that streamed from the axial bar high above the cylinder. The soft hum of magnetic shuttles and the distant sound of morning bells echoed across the tiled forecourt, harmonizing with the murmurs of students flooding into the atrium. The doors slid open, parting with a low hydraulic hiss. Inside, the noise grew louder, a symphony of footsteps, laughter, and the occasional chime of holosigns flashing announcements into the air. Wrist comms buzzed and flickered in sync with the building's internal systems, alerting students to class schedules, room changes, and tide-level advisories. A small group stood just beyond the entry vestibule, and as Cass stepped through, they turned toward him. "Hey, look who's back," Tim called out, his voice easy and warm. Christoph Green, the Tideball team's varsity captain, was the first to cross the floor. Tall, with dark raven hair and deep blue eyes, he moved like someone born to water, his shoulders sun-browned and confident. "Caspian," he said with a grin, offering a hand. "Good to see you, man. Wasn't the same without you last week." Cass clasped his hand, and Christoph gave him a nod that spoke of unspoken respect. Andrew March, short, solid, and wide-shouldered, offered a quick nod from just behind Christoph. His deep brown eyes gleamed under sharply cut black hair. "Coach says I've got to keep it legal this week. I told him I didn't do anything last time." Tim snorted. "You'd pounced that poor guy underwater." His suit failed. Drew shot back, shrugging. "Engineering flaw, not foul play." Christoph raised an eyebrow, smirking. "Nah, you just wanted a good look at his butt." Drew shrugged with a small grin. "It was kinda nice, now that you mention it." Christoph chuckled and gave him a light punch on the arm. "Thought so." Will Lincoln stepped up next, his British accent light and clipped. "You missed the most chaotic scrim of the season." March nearly got banned from the next game, and Christoph spent more time dodging fan club girls than making plays. Christoph rolled his eyes. "Jealousy doesn't suit you, Will." Cass smiled despite himself. The banter was natural and unforced, and the way they surrounded him was more than friendly. It was grounding. The quiet warmth of being welcomed without ceremony. They moved down the hallway together. The corridor was lined with interactive walls, transparent panels that displayed oceanic projections, announcements, or student artwork, depending on who approached. Cass's wrist comm pinged softly, flashing a glowing path overlay across the floor that guided him to his first class. Holosigns above the lockers updated in real time, shifting between soft blue and seafoam green. Near the east wing, a group of students lounged beneath a suspended reef sculpture that moved slowly, casting swaying patterns on the floor. As they passed the main locker bay, Tina stood near her usual bank of lockers, stowing a data pad into her shoulder bag. Her black hair gleamed under the ceiling lights, pulled into a short braid that hung just behind her ear. She looked up as they passed. "Morning, Cass," she said evenly. Cass nodded. "Hey." She gave him a small smile, not insincere, but without any hint of warmth beyond civility. Then she turned and walked off toward her wing. Will leaned in and whispered, "Girls are hard to read, mate." Cass didn't answer. His gaze lingered on the space Tina had left behind until the sound of lockers closing snapped him back. The group peeled away toward their respective locker pods, unlocking gear and syncing wrist comms to the school's net. Tim leaned close again, grabbing his pack and slinging it over one shoulder. "I'll save you a seat in Algebra 2, he said. Cass looked over at him. "Thanks." The bell chimed, clear and melodious, its sound echoing across the atrium like the ripple of a wave. Cass drew a slow breath and stepped into the current of students flooding toward their first class of the day. Algebra 2 was held on the 4th floor, in a room with high ceilings, curved walls, and panoramic displays that shifted between abstract equations and planetary orbits. Mrs. Blackwell, tall and stern with iron-grey hair pulled into a severe bun, greeted them from the front of the room. Her voice carried clearly over the soft hum of hollow displays activating across the classroom. "Today," she said, "we're breaking down quadratic equations. You've already reviewed the basics. Now we'll see how many of you actually understand them." The lesson began with practiced ease. A virtual display floated above her hand, and with a flick of her wrist, she expanded a quadratic equation for all to see. Her stylus danced through it with precision, color-coded annotations highlighting each step. The logic was sound, even elegant. Cass watched the demonstration and nodded along, or at least tried to. Once the equations were on the board and a few examples worked through, she broke the class into smaller groups. Cass and Tim shared a table near the back, along with two others who immediately buried themselves in their calculations. Cass stared at the problem hovering above his desk. The numbers blurred, not because they were complex, but because he couldn't make himself care about them. His mind kept flickering back to the funeral, to the empty house, to the last smile his mother gave him. He tried to focus, but the shapes on the board twisted uselessly. Tim leaned in, lowering his voice. "You okay?" Cass shook his head slightly. "I'm trying. I can't see how this fits. It feels backwards." Tim studied the problem, then reached across to rotate the interface. "It's like mapping current drift, remember? Think of the parabola like a tide curve. The vertex is your crest. It flows down both sides. One is the pull, the other is the release. These roots," he pointed, "those are your shore points." Cass blinked. That made sense. Slowly, he mirrored Tim's movements on his own panel. The numbers began to align. "Thanks," Cass murmured. "Seriously?" Tim nodded. "Anytime. How are you holding up?" Cass paused. "I'm not sure. Some moments I'm fine. Others, it hits like a pressure wave. Sometimes I can focus. Then, just like that, I can't." Tim leaned back in his seat. "You don't have to figure it out all at once. If you ever need to talk, I'm here. Or if you just want to sit and not say anything, I'm good with that too." Cass looked at him. Really looked. And for the first time in a long time, he felt anchored. "You think Drew really did it on purpose?" he asked, a quiet smile tugging at the edge of his mouth. Tim snorted. "With Drew? Who knows? But the refs said the other guy's suit had multiple bad catches. It was going to fail eventually. Drew just made it happen faster." Cass laughed, and Tim joined in. Mrs. Blackwell turned from the front of the room and gave them both a pointed look. They quieted quickly and returned to their work. When the period ended and the dismissal chime echoed through the room, students filtered out. Cass stood to follow them, but Mrs. Blackwell called his name. "Caspian, would you stay a moment?" He hesitated, then nodded. Once the room cleared, she approached his desk with folded hands. "I wanted to offer my condolences," she said. "Your parents were well regarded. I'm sorry for your loss." Cass dipped his head. "Thank you." She studied him for a moment. "I saw you and Timothy talking. What were you discussing?" Cass met her eyes evenly. He was helping explain the equation. "I was having trouble focusing, but he helped me understand. I'm feeling a little off today." Mrs. Blackwell nodded, though she didn't quite seem convinced. "Let me know if you need extra time. Or space." "I will." She waved him on. "Get to literature. You're reading Tides of First Contact, right?" Cass nodded. "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Let's not fall behind." Cass slipped out the door and joined the flow of students in the hall, his thoughts already turning toward the fictional alien ocean and the crash that started it all. Cass drew a slow breath and stepped into the current of students flooding toward their third class of the day. Literature passed in a blur. Cass found himself more focused than he expected, drawn in by the novel's premise. Tides of First Contact, a 21st-century speculative piece that imagined the crash landing of an alien undersea civilization into Earth's oceans. The class discussed the political and ecological implications of the First Contact event, and Cass even spoke up once or twice. One detail made him smile quietly to himself. The alien commander's name, Coral, was remarkably close to that of his niece, Coral. It was a small connection, but it stuck with him. After class, he changed quickly into the school-issued swimwear, streamlined and functional. The boys wore sleeveless sea-green compression tops with black hydroskin trunks that extended just above the knee. The girls' suits were similarly designed, modest yet athletic, with sea-green torso panels, black accents along the hips and shoulders, and supportive racerback cuts. Both versions minimized drag, while allowing complete freedom of motion, and featured biometric tracking fibers woven into the seams. He made his way down to the Academy's marine safety facility. The Aquatic Training Center was far more than a traditional pool. A lagoon-shaped complex opened into the central sea of the cylinder, with filtered sunlight pouring down from the axial sun bar and rippling across the water. At the far edge, a coral reef bloomed with color and movement, a living barrier where the controlled lagoon met the open marine zone. To one side, a smaller section housed the tideball training pool, already occupied by boys engaged in splash-heavy drills, mock tackles, and a good deal of showing off. Cass watched for a moment as Drew feigned an acrobatic dive, only to surface laughing when he was tackled mid-roll. Tim, standing beside him, elbowed Cass lightly. "You ever going to talk to her?" he asked, eyes flicking toward Tina, who stood farther down the deck, her towel slung over her shoulder. "She keeps looking, then looking away," Cass muttered. "Exactly," Tim said. "So either talk to her or move on. Don't play the game if you're not ready." Cass considered that, but didn't reply. Before he could form a response, both his and Tina's names flashed on the wrist comms displayed at the edge of the deck. "Thoinn. Holbrook. You're up," Coach has called. "Trial run. Let's go." Cass slipped into the water with the ease of someone who had never feared it. He submerged briefly, letting the cool embrace take him in. Something felt different this time. He could feel the flow of the lagoon, the subtle push and pull of the artificial tide. It was as though the water was speaking to him through sensation alone, current, pressure, even warmth. The grief pressing in on his chest lightened with every stroke. Coach has barked out the parameters of the trial. 200 meters out, around a marker buoy, and back in, underwater for as much of the first half as possible. They were being tested on speed, control, and breath discipline. Cass launched forward. The world narrowed to movement, rhythm, and flow. He didn't think about his breathing, only about the next pull, the next push. He felt like he could swim forever. The lagoon was no longer an artificial training ground, but a vast, embracing current that carried him effortlessly forward. When he surfaced at the end of the swim, his lungs weren't burning. His arms weren't sore. It was only when Coach Hass's whistle cut through the air, and the others on the deck started clapping, that he realized something was off. "Thoinn," the coach shouted. "You just beat the school record." Will added, he didn't just beat it. He crushed the city record too. Cass blinked. "I what?" Tina stepped forward, towel in hand. She raised an eyebrow and smiled. "Way to make a girl feel inadequate," she teased, and gave him a wink that left him even more confused than before. Her eyes trailed over him with a new kind of curiosity, and Cass felt his stomach twist, not unpleasantly. Before he could answer, Tim, Drew, and more were around him, all offering congratulations. It felt overwhelming, but in a good way. Coach Hass raised his hand. "Hold up. You four, bring your wrist comms." They exchanged confused glances, but complied. The coach ran a small handheld scanner over each device, nodding slightly. "What's that about?" Tina asked. "School AI detected an unusual sonar signal during the trial," Hass said. "Wanted to make sure it wasn't a feedback loop from one of your devices. Seems clean. Probably just a sensor ghost. Those calibration gremlins again." Cass didn't say anything. He just looked back at the water, which shimmered and rippled under the sun bar's steady glow. Something about it felt different now, and deep down, he knew it wasn't just in his head. Lunch was a noisy swirl of students spilling into the cafeteria pavilion, where transparent walls offered an expansive view of the lagoon's shallows. Cass followed Tim to a circular table already half occupied by a mix of boys and girls from their class. As they sat, the buzz of conversation shifted to include them. "You really smashed the city record?" one of the girls asked, eyebrows raised. "Only counts if it's during competition," another boy pointed out, popping a bite of synthesized kelp roll into his mouth. Cass shrugged. "Doesn't matter. It just felt good to swim. That's all." Tim glanced at him with a faint smile, recognizing something in Cass's tone. Before the conversation could drift again, Tina walked over with her tray and, without asking, sat beside Cass. "So," she said, casually tossing her braid over her shoulder. "Pretty impressive out there." Cass nodded, unsure how to respond. Tina didn't linger on him, though. She leaned toward the other girls. "Did you see the announcement? Next week's field trip is confirmed." That caught everyone's attention. "They're taking us out to the Westward Reef," she said, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "The marine ecology team is introducing new Earth species, hawksbill turtles, and white-tipped reef sharks." "That's your class, right?" one of the girls asked. "Yup," Tina said. "They let us log observations and tag behavior for the AI database." She turned to Cass and then asked, "Isn't your marine biology class going on the same trip?" Cass nodded and told her, "Yeah. I'm looking forward to some reef diving." "Aren't you afraid of the sharks?" the girl across from Tina asked. Cass thought he remembered her name as Jessie. He smiled and told her, "Not really. First of all, Mr. Hass will be with us. Secondly, they're not really a danger to divers, as long as you aren't stupid enough to strap a speared fish to your belt. They might investigate a diver, but they don't really attack them." Jessie nodded and turned her conversation back to Tina and the field trip. Tina gave him another one of those enigmatic looks, like she was sizing him up for something, before she too returned to that conversation. Cass watched her, trying to follow the rhythm of her attention. She looked his way every so often, always just long enough for him to wonder what she was thinking, before turning back to her conversation. It was like trying to predict the tide. Just when he thought he understood the pattern, it shifted. The rest of the day passed in quiet rhythm. Atlantea history was a lecture on early intercontinental migrations aboard orbital arcs, and Cass took notes almost absently, his mind still partially in the water. Later in studio arts, he settled in front of a digital sketchpad, working out rough lines for a new project. He was designing a sculpture of coral as a mermaid, youthful, innocent, and whimsical. Her hair flowed like seaweed, her tail curled in a playful pose, and her wide-eyed smile captured the joy she always showed when they swam together. He planned to sculpt it in clay, then cast it in bronze as a Yule gift. The idea felt right. It gave his hands something to do, and his heart a little purpose to shape.